Hi guys, welcome to the next installment of the IB Lanterna geography videos. I'm Liam again, and this time I'm going to be talking about how to write a really top IB geography essay. Okay, so I've asked all the other Lanterna tutors, those guys who scored super well in their IB geography exams, what are the top tips and tricks that we were using to make sure that we could access those top marks, okay? And you guys know how important essay writing is for your final grade. You high-level students, you'll be taking 3 papers. Standard level students just do paper 1 and 2. But for each of them, okay, there's a really high amount of marks awarded for your essay writing. Paper 1, that's your option paper. Each section of that paper, you'll be taking 2 sections if you're a standard level student, 3 at high level. The second part of it is always a 10-mark essay. And overall, if you add up all those 10 marks, that's worth 50% of that paper. So really important that we practice how we write essays and recognise that actually we're going to win ourselves a lot of marks by doing well in them. Paper 2, that's our core paper. Okay, so you'll be talking about your population change. You'll also be talking about climate change, and you'll be finally talking about resources. So you've got those short answer questions at the beginning. Again, at the very end, you choose between 2 different long answer questions. They're 15 marks in length. You'll probably be given an option of 2, and then you choose one to write about. So that's the longest essay you'll be writing in the course. And in paper 3, if you guys are doing high level, I hope you are. I think it's a really cool paper. My favourite one that I wrote in the IB, it's 100% essay based. Okay, and what that means is you're going to be choosing a question, and then you have 2 essays within it, a 10 marker and a 15 marker. And this is where we can really put into practice some of the things that we'll be talking about today. Okay, showing the flair, showing how well constructed we can make our arguments, just showing the examiners that we really are good, top geographers who know exactly what we're talking about. And I want to talk kind of now about the key ingredients. In a minute, I'm going to go into kind of more detail about what each of these things mean, how you can make sure that you are nailing these points. But generally, I think a list of these ideas are something that every good essay needs. Okay, and the first one is following the command terms. I'm sure this is something your teachers have talked about before, but I know a lot of students struggle with understanding what this kind of means and what it means for you in terms of your essay writing. So I've just kind of pulled this from the IB geography syllabus. These are the kind of prompts we'll be given when we're getting in those 10, 15 mark questions. Comparing and contrasting, discussing, evaluating, examining, justifying, and of course the IB's favourite sentence, to what extent. And what this means, so we need to kind of construct an argument and then make a judgment. Okay, so the IB is really telling us kind of the roadmap for success. We need to weigh up some sides, okay, and you decide along which lines you divide those arguments, and then finally we've got to give some sort of perspective in terms of answering the initial question we've been given. That means we have to construct a really good argument, okay, and that's implicit. We need to make sure that we aren't kind of jumping around too much, making sure that when we set out what we're going to do in the introduction, we follow it. And that's why balance is kind of really important too. You can't have an effectively constructed argument. You can't argue something unless you give different perspectives, and that's really important. And I'll talk to you in a bit more detail in a second about those body paragraphs. How can we show balance? How can we show we understand the question without sitting exactly on the fence, but also kind of making sure we do have that judgment that we can put in our conclusion or kind of pepper in throughout the essay. That's why evaluation is super important too. And a lot of students kind of get hung up on what evaluation really means. And again, they tend to throw it in at the end, and that's great. You need to make sure you have it somewhere. Okay, but it's more than the strengths and weaknesses of an argument. Okay, it's how strong is that argument. Okay, you can go even deeper. Who said that? Okay, where is that statistic from? Is that accurate? But then also taking a step back and recognizing how important something is contextually. So if it's an option paper and you're talking about hazards, which of those particular consequences are the most severe? Okay, not just not by numbers. Okay, one number might be bigger than another, but what are the knock-on effects of certain ideas you're presenting? That shows evaluation, and I'd be trying to get that in throughout my essay if possible. And that means also being lucid. Okay, lucid just means kind of making sure you're really clear. For me to be really clear, I actually need to make sure I include other perspectives within an answer. So know that there's not one exact right answer. You're never going to get an essay question, I hope not, and you're going to think, oh, that's exactly right. Okay, there's only one answer here. Make sure you bring in those other perspectives, and I'm sure when you practice these essays, you'll get better at doing that. The final kind of thing to mention then is making sure we get our case studies as centrally as possible in those essays. Hopefully you guys have got a really good bank of case studies, and you can use them throughout any essay that you guys are going to be writing across the 3 papers if you're that high level student. If you don't, I'd be trying to do this. I'd be trying to improvise, adapt, and overcome. Okay, when you get that 10-mark essay question, you don't have a case study. We are able to get around that. You'd hope you don't get in that situation, but the pressure in the exam, it can do funny things. I'd be trying to make sure we have some sort of example we can bring in. And when I get stuck, I remember always getting to a question and wanting to bring in a new idea. Think about your local area, think about what you've been reading in the news, okay, and then bring in an example. Okay, but an example can't be, for example, in London. Okay, there is no point in writing that. What an example really needs to show an examiner that it's actually relevant and useful for an argument you're making is some sort of time. Okay, so when was it? 2016, in the 90s, in January of this year. Okay, then where was it a little bit more specifically? So it's always great if you can name a country, but why not take it a step further? Why not think about the capital city or a particular part of a city or province? So much better to say, instead of, for example, in 2013 in China, okay, in 2013 in Hubei province, okay, it's highly relevant right now in the news, okay, there was this particular. That just shows, yeah, not only your geographical knowledge, but the detail you're willing to put into an essay. Okay, and the final thing we need is some sort of development. Okay, so don't just put, for example, in 2013 in central London, put in what is that showing us. Okay, there was 10,000 reported cases of illegal immigration or something. That's a migration question. Okay, add in some detail, because there's no point just name dropping unless it's going to bring some kind of value to your essay. And this has all just been taken based on the criteria the IB is giving us. Down the bottom, those bullet points, I'm not going to run through them right now. You guys, by all means, can pause the video. Just shows what they are looking for. And this is something examiners will have right next to them when they're going through your essay. So be familiar. And if you ever get stuck thinking, I don't know what to write about, try and bring one of these points to mind in order to make sure that you can bank some marks when you're writing it. Let's talk about the introduction then. Crucially, we need to show that we understand the question. And there are a couple of ways that we can try and do that. The first of which is trying to rephrase it. Okay, so you can break down that question a little bit more, maybe even by defining some of that key terminology. If it's a migration question, talk about exactly what forced migration is. What is the definition? Immediately, okay, you're just showing that examiner you know exactly what you're talking about. You can place this essay within a topic that you've been talking about, and then you can kind of get into the more creative part of the essay, which is constructing how you might argue it. And I think a really good way of showing that higher level geography ability or geographical ability is maybe discussing the significance of the topic. What I mean by that is I've got a question from the May 19 paper. It was, of all the demographic challenges nations face, an ageing population is the most serious. Why are they asking us that question? And I think you guys can do a really good job of mentioning the significance. Okay, aging population is something that we're experiencing in the United Kingdom. In Japan, it's a particular issue. Why do we want to talk about that? Well, why don't we place that in the context of global climate change, greater dependency, okay, ensuring that we have a welfare state that can provide for the entire economy, the entirety of society. That's a really cool thing to do, and it's not a lot of things I see when I'm reading IB geography essays. So if you can do that, all power to you. That just puts you immediately into a position where you're showing the examiner you kind of mean business. And I think your introduction is probably the most important thing psychologically when you're reading it as an examiner. You can write, a fairly good essay, but if you do a really banging introduction that shows exactly what you're going to be talking about, shows that you know the topic content kind of inside out, that is only going to positively reinforce how an examiner reads your essay. Maybe even outline your argument too. What I mean by this is a couple of lines just being like, I will argue this, and then afterwards I will examine this, and this. I know though, it's really hard to do that kind of off the bat. A lot of the times we have some great ideas as we're writing the essay. My advice for you guys then, okay, is just take a couple of minutes at the end to go back. Okay, leave a couple of lines in that introduction and then just write down what you did in those following paragraphs. That is an incredibly high kind of skill to develop and to put into an essay. If you can show, okay, that you know exactly what you're going to be writing about and that you write it really well, it's not going to only show that you are an intelligent geographical thinker, but it's also just going to help the examiner keep their place in the essay. Okay, they're going to read hundreds of essays. You guys can signpost it really well and just explain exactly what you're going to argue. That can only be beneficial to your IB geography and essay marks. And of course, you can obviously mention some of those case studies that you might be using as the kind of focal point for your argument. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about body paragraphs then. And I think aiming for about 3 is the optimal amount. The reason I say that, this is not a hard and fast rule, okay, but I think those shorter paragraphs, they don't really let you go into that depth, that evaluation you need to access those higher kind of grade brackets. So the longer the longer the paragraph, okay, without it being super long, I think that just enables you to dive a little bit deeper into some of the content, some of the evidence that you are presenting in that essay. I'd keep it punchy, okay, short to the point sentences. Try and avoid being super blabbery. Okay, if you have the ability, if you're a great writer, by all means use that flair, but make sure you kind of do the talking with the arguments you're presenting. And we're going to be talking across these videos on this YouTube channel of some of the great content and ideas that you guys can put in the essay. So don't worry too much about that right now, but just keep it punchy and present the evidence and the ideas that you want to without wasting time on trying to make it sound lovely. Okay, because it could sound wonderful, but if you haven't hit the points, there's no point in writing that essay. And just show your knowledge. Okay, try and impress that examiner. That's what's kind of on my mind the whole time. Okay, how can I make sure that I use my examples and my case studies and the ideas I've learned in class to impress that examiner? And if you guys ever get stuck in terms of, how can I show the examiner that I've got a really good structure or I really know what's kind of going on, I'd be encouraging guys to just take a step back and think about this thing here. Okay, this is the compass of geography. So you've got that north, east, south, west. Okay, and if you guys are ever kind of struggling with how you might break down a question, so let's say it's the aging population question. Okay, well, I don't know how to structure this. Maybe I do aging population versus a youthful population. Great. Okay, but break that down even further. Why not think about a comparison between the two in terms of the impact on nature or the environment, and impact on the economy, socially, socioculturally. Okay, how's that going to affect families, relationships, and religions? And there's a load of really cool things you can examine in that particular part of the compass, and then also think about the politics of it. Okay, I've totally forgotten what my teacher had as W, but I put Winston for Winston Churchill, very famous British politician. Okay, that helps me remember. Okay, what is this going to mean in terms of actually implementing policies? What is most important for a government or a country in that particular moment, in the short term, in the long term? Okay, just putting that in there kind of enables me to remember some of those ideas that I might have neglected to think about earlier in my essay. The final thing I want to talk about then is the conclusion, and this is absolutely essential. You can write a great essay, but if you don't have a conclusion, you are really losing out on those top marks. Okay. Equally, if you think you've written a rubbish essay, always tie it up with a conclusion, because it can do wonders in terms of how that essay sounds in its kind of totality. So make sure you definitely put in a conclusion. It doesn't have to be super long. A couple of sentences, just trying to synthesize your argument. Okay, just sum up what you've said. It could be quite similar to those last few lines in that introduction, but then also make that judgment. So if it's a question in terms of aging population, is the worst challenge facing a demography or a population? Okay, is it? Yes or no? Don't leave it loose-ended. You can leave it kind of in the middle, but I'd be trying to kind of put it onto the scale's a little bit heavier on one side. So let's say you've compared an aging population and a youthful population. You can say, okay, an aging population is challenging for the strain on social care, the strain on taxes. Okay, you can say that's also an issue for the youthful population, but a youthful population also requires more education services, etc., etc. Overall, however, okay, I believe a youthful population is more damaging, because an aging population, they can still participate in the economy through volunteering, part-time jobs, that sort of thing. Okay, just giving an actual answer to a question does go a long way to making sure you hit those marks you want to get. The final thing I want to mention before I tie up this particular video is just my special tip, and that's using your reading time. Guys, I know exactly what you're thinking. You get your reading time, you're like, this is such a waste of time, this is so boring, why are we sitting here for 5 minutes? Please use it. Okay, I think you kind of decide your grade and how well you do on these essays when you use that reading time. Okay, my advice for you guys is think through the paper, okay, and pick out those essays you're going to write already. maybe even plan them a little bit in your head. Okay, but beyond that, just make sure you know the kind of ideas, the topics you're going to be discussing. Okay, because by the time you get to those questions later, your brain has been subconsciously kind of thinking about what it could be writing about. So you might get a question on migration or population or climate change, and there might be a term that you've just totally forgotten about, or you can't remember that case study you covered. But because you've looked at it at the beginning, when you get there at the end, you will have actually been thinking about something you can write about. And that's a super, super cool trick. And I encourage you guys to make sure you use it. It can only benefit you in the long run. It can only help you kind of bank those marks and start positively and feel really good about the exam. Okay, because it's a little bit of like a psychological game. You guys give yourself that advantage. That's going to only reap positive benefits for you as you write those essays in those paper 1s, 2s, and 3s. Cool. Thanks so much, guys, for clicking on the video and sticking with me. If you guys have any questions, as always, you can email me. I'm just Liam at lanternaeducation.com. And by all means, also check out some of the stuff on our website. That's just lanternaeducation.com. We've got loads of blogs on this geography stuff. I've just written a geography IA guide, but we've also got information and free resources for all of your kind of core IB subjects. Beyond that, if you guys are interested in getting a tutor with us, I could be your tutor in fact, but you can also access tutors across a range of IB subjects. You can find out more about that on the website too. Cool. Thanks so much for tuning in, and see you guys next time.